On February 9th, 2004, 21-year-old Maura Murray crashed her car into a snowbank on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. The events that unfolded afterward remain one of the most baffling mysteries in recent true crime history. To this day, no one knows what happened to Maura after that crash, or whether it was an accident, foul play, or something else entirely. This story begins with Maura's life before the incident, a young woman on the brink of adulthood, grappling with her own personal struggles. But it was a moment that would change everything for her family, friends, and the entire community. Maura Murray was a bright, ambitious young woman studying nursing at the University of Massachusetts. She had a family who loved her deeply, yet behind the scenes, there were complex layers of stress and turmoil in her life. At the time of her disappearance, Maura was facing a number of personal challenges. She had recently been involved in a serious incident at the prestigious West Point Military Academy, where she had stolen makeup from a store on the military base, a crime that almost led to her expulsion. This event followed her, casting a long shadow over her life, despite her best efforts to move forward. By 2004, she was dealing with issues related to identity theft and credit card fraud. These were legal problems she kept hidden from her family, adding to the pressures Maura was already facing. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Maura appeared to be in distress. She had a long-term boyfriend, Bill Rausch, but their relationship was rocky. Maura had also been involved in an affair with her track coach, which added another layer of complexity to her emotional state. By the weekend of her disappearance, Maura was visibly struggling. On Saturday night, February 7th, 2 days before her disappearance, Maura was involved in a car accident near her campus after a night of drinking. Her father, Fred Murray, had come to visit her that weekend, and after the accident, he was understandably upset. Maura's behavior raised questions. She had been drinking heavily, and after the crash, Maura made a call to her father, who would later tell police she was upset, though the full extent of their conversation remains unclear. The day before she disappeared, Maura went to a party and had a strange interaction with her friends. Around 3 a.m., Maura told her friends she needed to speak to her father urgently, even though it was a time when everyone knew she shouldn't be driving. She later got into a car and crashed into a guardrail, leading to her father's involvement once again. After this second accident, Maura's father was furious and they had a confrontation about the events. The car, which was borrowed from Fred, was significantly damaged. This incident marked a turning point in Maura's life, and it was clear that her emotional state was fragile. On the morning of February 9th, Maura sent an email to her professors, telling them she would not be attending classes that week due to a death in the family. This was a lie, as no one in her family had passed away. Her next move seemed oddly deliberate. She withdrew money from ATMs and purchased a large amount of alcohol, way more than any one person could consume. She then drove toward the White Mountains, a popular spot in New Hampshire, where she had some previous connections. Maura had mentioned to a few people that she had plans to visit a cabin there, and it's possible she was seeking a quiet place to escape her problems. But the story doesn't end there. Around 7 p.m. that evening, Maura's car was found abandoned on the side of the road in Haverhill. But the story of her disappearance began to take shape earlier that day. Maura had stopped at a local grocery store just an hour before the crash, and a cashier recalled seeing her with 2 other young women. The trio was purchasing alcohol and cigarettes, and the cashier later identified Maura in surveillance footage. The other women Maura was with have never been conclusively identified, which leaves a key question. Could one of these women have played a role in Maura's disappearance? After the crash, Maura's car was found locked, with her belongings still inside. There were no obvious signs of foul play, but Maura was nowhere to be found. What made the situation even more confusing was that Butch Atwood, a local school bus driver, had stopped when he saw Maura's car. He offered to help, and Maura reportedly told him that she had already called AAA for assistance. But Atwood knew something wasn't right. The area had no cell phone service, so it was impossible for her to have made that call. Still, Atwood left the scene and went home, thinking Maura was okay. Within a few minutes of the 911 call, Maura vanished. By the time the police arrived, her car was still there, but there was no sign of her. As authorities arrived on the scene, they found evidence that suggested Maura may have been intoxicated. There was a box of wine inside the car, which had spilled onto the ceiling during the crash. Officers also noticed a Coke can, possibly mixed with alcohol. At first, this led authorities to believe that Maura had been drinking and driving, which explained why she may have fled the scene, possibly in fear of being arrested for a DUI. But the more they looked into the situation, the more questions arose. There were no footprints in the snow leading away from the scene, and no one had seen Maura after she spoke to Butch Atwood. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Several theories began to emerge about what might have happened to Maura Murray. Was it a hit and run? Was she abducted? Or had Maura intentionally disappeared, choosing to leave behind her old life and start fresh somewhere else? In the absence of clear answers, the investigation into Maura's disappearance became a maze of speculation. Some theories, like the possibility of a hit and run, seemed plausible at first. However, no evidence could support this claim. No one in the area recalled seeing a vehicle other than Maura S. at the time of the accident. Others suggested that she may have been abducted, but the lack of physical evidence and reliable witness testimony made this theory hard to prove. Another theory that gained traction was that Maura had intentionally vanished. Her emotional state had been fragile, and the day she disappeared, she had made decisions that seemed strange to those around her. She bought a large amount of alcohol, withdrew all her money from the bank, and headed into the White Mountains, possibly to start a new life, far away from the pressures she had been facing. But could she have disappeared of her own accord? Or had something else happened, something far darker? One of the most chilling aspects of this case is the idea that Maura may have known someone who could have played a part in her disappearance. Was there someone in her life who had a motive to harm her? And if so, why would they have waited so long to act? As the days passed without a trace of Maura, the investigation into her disappearance grew more perplexing. Theories swirled about what might have happened to her, and every lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. Despite the thorough search efforts and a nationwide media campaign, Maura Murray remained a mystery, a young woman lost in the wilderness with no clear explanation. The search for Maura was extensive, covering vast areas of woods and mountainous terrain, but it turned up nothing. Authorities scoured the area for weeks, and the lack of any physical evidence led many to question whether Maura had simply walked away from the scene. There were no footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, and no personal items found along the road. The scent of her that was traced by dogs ended abruptly in the middle of the road, suggesting that she had been picked up by someone, or perhaps willingly got into a vehicle. This lack of physical evidence only added to the growing mystery of her disappearance. In the months that followed, there were numerous reports and tips from people who thought they had seen Maura or had information that could help solve the case. However, none of these leads panned out. As the months turned into years, the case of Maura Murray began to feel like an unsolvable puzzle, with pieces that just didn't fit together. Her family, devastated and heartbroken, refused to give up hope, even as the case seemed to grow colder. One key element of the case that remained intriguing was Maura's personal life. Despite the ongoing investigation, many felt that the answers to her disappearance might lie within the complex relationships she had with the people around her. Could someone close to her have been involved in her disappearance, either directly or indirectly? Maura's relationship with her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, was complicated. At the time of her disappearance, they had been in a tumultuous relationship marked by infidelity on both sides. Bill was reportedly unfaithful to Maura, which may have contributed to her emotional distress. Some have speculated that their rocky relationship could have played a role in her decision to leave, or, in a darker scenario, that it might have been a factor in her possible abduction or harm. But could Bill have been involved in her disappearance, or was he just another piece in a much larger and more puzzling puzzle? Bill's reactions to Maura's disappearance were scrutinized by many. When Maura first went missing, he was described as being distant, almost detached, in his responses to the media. This led some to wonder if Bill knew more than he let on, or if he was hiding something. It is also worth noting that Bill's actions in the years following Maura's disappearance raised eyebrows. In 2011, Bill Roche was accused of a disturbing crime involving an attempted sexual assault and pushing a woman down an escalator in Washington, D.C. This revelation added a layer of suspicion to Bill's character, especially given his connection to Maura at the time she vanished. But was he involved in Maura's disappearance, or was he simply the victim of circumstances, caught up in the chaos of her unresolved fate? Another angle that emerged was Maura's possible connection to someone else who may have been involved in her disappearance, a former track coach from her time at UMass. This man, known only as Hussein, had an interesting connection to Maura. He had been involved in a secret relationship with her and was reportedly one of the few people who knew about her desire to run away and start a new life. Some believe that Maura's disappearance was part of a larger plan, orchestrated by her and possibly aided by someone she trusted. Hussein had a cabin in the White Mountains, an area Maura had mentioned wanting to visit, and it's possible that Maura was planning to stay there to escape the chaos of her life. But did something go terribly wrong once she arrived? Could someone have found her and harmed her, or had she simply decided to disappear forever? There was also a theory that Maura's disappearance was linked to her emotional struggles and her desire to escape the problems she was facing. She had a history of emotional breakdowns, particularly in the days leading up to her disappearance. A few days before Maura vanished, her supervisor at her part-time job reported that Maura had suffered a complete breakdown. She was nearly catatonic and kept repeating the name of her sister. This breakdown, combined with the strange behavior leading up to her disappearance, such as her email to her professors, her large purchase of alcohol, and her withdrawal of money from the bank, suggested that Maura may have been in crisis, possibly contemplating taking her own life or choosing to disappear and start over somewhere else. But if that were the case, why would she have left behind so many clues? Why would she have sent emails and made plans for the days after her disappearance? Even more disturbing were the reports that Maura had contacted a social worker just before she went missing. The woman, who worked with victims of abuse and those seeking new identities, had spoken to Maura just before her disappearance. This call, though brief, raised questions about whether Maura was trying to escape from an abusive situation. Had she planned to disappear and use the services of this social worker to start over, or was there something more sinister at play? Despite the numerous theories, there was one thing that remained clear. Maura Murray was never seen again after the night of her disappearance. The investigation into her case has continued for years, with new leads and theories emerging, but no definitive answers. What happened to Maura? Did she walk away from her life, choosing to leave everything behind? Or was she the victim of foul play, someone's dark secret, or a tragic accident that will never be fully understood? As time passed, the search for Maura Murray slowed down, but her case has never been entirely forgotten. Her family has continued to seek answers, and her story has captured the imagination of people around the world. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and social media platforms have kept the mystery alive, with people still debating the possible outcomes of this unsolved case. The legacy of Maura's disappearance is a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the complexity of the human condition. It raises questions about identity, trust, and the lengths people will go to in order to escape their pasts. Despite the passage of time, the question remains, what happened to Maura Murray? The mystery is far from over, and until there are answers, Maura's story will continue to intrigue, haunt, and inspire those who seek the truth. There are no easy answers, no clear conclusions, but one thing is certain: Maura Murray's disappearance will not be forgotten. In the end, the case remains unsolved. Whether Maura is alive, hiding somewhere, or the victim of a crime, only time will tell. For now, all that remains is the mystery, and the hope that one day the truth will come to light, and Maura's family and friends will finally have the closure they so desperately seek.